That verse that ended the reading for today is the verse that we've decided to use as the foundation for a vision of South Church. We've chosen a different translation for that, and that verse reads, "Be compassionate as God is compassionate." And after we chose that verse as the foundation for our vision, one of our members in the church sent me a comic strip of Hagar the Horrible, and the member whose name will remain unspoken, but his initials are Whitey Johnson. Sends this two-framed comic strip. In the first frame, there is Hagar the Horrible, with his Viking helmet on at some Viking bar with the stein in front of him. And next to him is this big, burly fellow who's also a Viking, big hat, muscles. And Hagar says to him, "They call you Mean Max, but tell me, do you ever feel compassion for other people?" And then in the second and last frame, Mean Max is turned toward Hagar a little bit, and his face is tight, and it looks like there's sweat that's popping out, and his teeth are clenched, and you can just hear him growling it. And he says, "Yeah, I feel sorry for people who get in my way." That's it. That's all there is. It's 2 panels, and I guess we can't do it in 2 panels. There's a part of each of us, I imagine, that is a mean Max. That is, wants to hurt others before we get hurt. You may be more creative than Mean Max. You don't go around hitting somebody with a heavy, blunt weapon. But there are so many options in the modern world. Look what Facebook gives us. The ability to publicly humiliate other people. Rumor mongering, manipulation, direct insult, private pictures displayed for all of humankind to see. And it feels really good once you do it. Once you get somebody before they get you, you feel justified. But the morning after, another remorseful part of you may rise with anger toward Mean Max because you feel badly about it. This way of handling our enemies is an up and down way, and we tend to discover that if we handle our enemies this way, that our life becomes kind of a whack-a-mole carnival game. You whack one of your enemies here, another one pops up over there, and then one pops over there, and then one pops. You see what I'm saying? That's what tends to happen. The people that irritate us, we think we get rid of, and then boom, there they are again, just with another face. In order for the Mean Max to come out in us, we have to turn the other person into something that is less than human. We have to disconnect from our common humanity. And this is done by the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that brings us, along with emotions and motivations, the fight or flight response. The good news is that evolution created the amygdala hundreds of thousands of years ago, thereby enabling us as a species to escape being a tasty tidbit for a saber-toothed tiger. The bad news is we don't live in the jungle anymore. But no one has told the amygdala. So, the amygdala now responds to work stress, traffic, perfectionist instincts, and irritable colleagues as if they were saber-tooths. And it spills out stress hormones into our blood, ups our heart rates, and turns our enemies into something less than real human beings, making us behave at times miserably toward one another. In the face of all this, Jesus' instruction in today's test seems absolutely nuts. Love your enemies. What are you, crazy? I mean, the definition of enemy is somebody that you hate. Love your enemies. Jesus isn't telling us here to feel all warm and fuzzy and kumbaya toward our enemies. He's talking about actions. The same actions he applies to loving your neighbor, he applies to loving your enemy. Do good, bless, and pray. Evolutionarily speaking, all of the major religions have been seeking for millennia to moderate the amygdala by developing the frontal lobe of our brains with these ideas. So somehow turned into a science class. There will be a test. I want to suggest that the way of compassion to which Jesus is pointing here is no easy path, but it is doable. And you have to do these things to love your enemy, but it's possible to do it. Number one, cultivate compassion for a real human being. Number two, accept the differences that you have with this human being. Number three, wholeheartedly give yourself to this human being. The amygdala makes it difficult to cultivate compassion for a real human being because it creates a snapshot of your enemy. And these snapshots are the implicit biases that we have absorbed from our culture. You see a group of young black men walking towards you at dusk on the sidewalk, and your amygdala shouts, "Run!" You meet a well-dressed, confident woman who is a wealthy lawyer, and immediately your amygdala marks her as someone who can't be trusted because she will certainly twist the truth for money. Or you see a blonde in a white dress standing on a heat grate with the rising air elevating her skirt while she holds it down with her hands. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. The amygdala moves you in that case as well. These are snapshots of danger and pleasure that prevent you from relating to the young black men, to the wealthy lawyer, or the blonde woman as human beings. So you must cultivate an awareness of their humanity. And how do you do that? You turn the snapshot into a movie. No one is just a snapshot. We are all more than our political views, our religious commitments, our race, or national identity. The snapshot enemy is also a divinely inspired child of God, much fuller than one little picture. Ebba Edstrom was 89 years old when Sally and I met her, just out of college. Ebba was born in Sweden and still had the accent. She had a little fur ball of a dog named Coco. And when Coco died, we visited her, and I said to her, "Ebba, I'm so sorry your dog died." She turned to me and looked me right in the face and said, "Denny, Coco was not a dog. Coco was a human being. Coco was not a dog. Coco was a human being." She was very serious. We've laughed about it for decades, but she was very serious. And what she is saying to me is that Coco isn't just the snapshot of a dog. Coco has likes and dislikes and ups and downs and a real history and a personality. You can't just call Coco a dog. Coco is a human being. Sometimes, it seems as if we treat our pets more like human beings than some of our snapshot enemies. For some people, the phrase illegal immigrant is a snapshot that leaves out the desperate circumstances that people are fleeing from, as well as the hopes and dreams that they have for their families. For some people, wealthy businessman is a snapshot of selfish individualism, which leaves out the hard work that they have done and how important it is for them to provide jobs for others. If Coco is a human being, then our snapshot enemies are human beings as well. So first of all, if you want to love your enemy, you have to cultivate compassion for a human being. Secondly, you must accept that this human being is different than you. You must develop a curiosity about the differences, not simply notice the differences like we usually do. Oh yeah, I notice. Yeah, person's nuts. They're ridiculous. Yeah, I noticed that we're different. Really? Woo-hoo. We have to do more than that. We must actively accept who the person is. This is so much more than tolerating another person, which is simply a form of saying, I can't stand you, but I'll put up with you if I must. When we discover that someone holds different opinions, our amygdala kicks in and we are angered because they are different than we are. And our goal becomes to persuade them to hold our opinion. But we have to accept them as they present themselves. This does not mean that we should agree with their opinions or that they should agree with our opinions. It means that they have the same right and responsibility that we have. That is to be the person that we are, honestly. When our church was going through the open and affirming process, that is, considering whether or not to allow homosexuals full acceptance in our community of faith, I was visiting an older man who was a member of our congregation. And he said to me that he was opposed to including homosexuals in any way. I could see in his eyes and hear in his voice that he genuinely felt this way. And I told him that though I didn't share his view, I respected him sharing it with me. And after a few moments of silence, he asked me what my view was. And I said, well, I believe that homosexuals deserve the very same inclusion that heterosexuals receive because we're all children of God. A few moments of silence. He asks, did you always believe that? No, I said. A few moments of silence. He says, well, why did you change your mind? I told him the story that I've told some of you. I said, because I had a kid in my youth group who years later came out of the closet. And he contacted me. And he thanked me for saving his life. Because at one point he had wanted to commit suicide because of his sexual orientation. And he asked me if I thought Jesus loved homosexuals. And I said, without skipping a beat and without knowing that he was gay, yes, of course. Jesus loves everyone. So, I said to the man, because a minister that this young man respected said that God loved homosexuals, he is alive today. That is why I changed my mind. Silence for a few moments. And the man turned and looked at me and said, I see why you changed your mind. And then he said, when I was 12 years old, my dad told me to go to a friend's house, a middle-aged single man, and help him with some yard work. And the man accosted me, and I escaped by running right through the closed screen door. I was really scared. And after a few moments, I said, I see why you believe that homosexuals should be excluded. We didn't change each other's minds, but we accepted each other with a deeper understanding of who we actually were. We must be willing to accept differences in others and not to change them. Finally, to love an enemy is to turn wholeheartedly toward them. Now, I'm not talking about being on a battlefield here. You know, if you've got guns in your hands, well, conversation is broken down totally, and so I'm not saying be open-hearted and wholehearted in that way. But short of that, We are to have compassion for our enemy as a human being, accept the fact that we have differences, and turn wholeheartedly toward the other. Rabbi Amy Eilberg was a supervisor of clinical pastoral education. She and her fellow supervisor brought students through an intensive program of caring for the ill that included hospital visitation, group work, and classes. Most folks don't know about clinical pastoral education except ministers. But it's something in seminary we all have to do. At the center of the pastoral training model is the supervisor-supervisee relationship. As Amy and her partner looked at a new group of students coming in, Amy noticed that one of the students was from Germany, and her heart clenched. Her immediate family had been victims of Nazi pogroms before the war, and members of her extended family had died in extermination camps during the war. And though at this point in her life she had dealt with some of the hatred and fear, she still instinctively shivered when she heard a German accent. She was afraid that she would not be able to take on this student and take him fully into her heart. And so she told her co-supervisor, "So I can't have him as my supervisee." And her co-supervisor said, "Well, you know what that means. You have to have him." And then she agreed. She prepared for their first session with some fear and trembling. And at that first session, Dietrich was the young man's name. He told her of his goals for the program, and she shared what the process would be like. It was relatively comfortable, no real problems. But suddenly, at the end of the session, Dietrich spoke up with great reverence about the opportunity that he had now to work with a rabbi. He spoke with great remorse and personal pain about what his people had done to her people, and he began to cry. Amy's heart opened up to him, and she told him of the Jewish tradition of tikkun olam, the idea that human beings work together to repair the brokenness in the world. And with wet eyes and a heavy German accent, he said to her, "So it seems we have some prepare work to do, you and I." And later, the rabbi writes, "I could almost feel God prying my heart open. He was not an enemy. He was a real human being who had a different life experience than I, but together we could help repair the world, for we are part of the same circle." Why do we give money to the church? You're going to have to pray it up in a few minutes. Give your pledges and your envelopes. I'm surprised you all showed up. It's a great thing. Give your gifts and your offerings. Why? Why do we do it? We do it because we know that there is a mean max in all of us, in every person on the planet. We do it because we know that the amygdala gets its way all too often. And we do it because we know that the path of compassion has to be followed. We do it because we know that we have to treat our enemies as real human beings. We know that we have to accept the differences in others. We know that we have to give ourselves wholeheartedly to this process because it is the most important thing on the planet at this moment in history. There is nothing more important than what we are doing. To be a community of compassion, to create people of compassion. It's what we do with our youngsters. It's why we give them the Bible. It's what we do with our youth. It's why we send them on mission trips. It's what we do in our adult life here with compassionate conversations about homosexuality and race and the other things that we talk about. We know that this is important. And those of you who have been veterans of war know better than the rest of us what happens if this pathway is not kept and trod until the end. It may not be the thing we do best, but it is the best thing that we do. To be a community of compassion that sees our enemies as human beings, that accepts the difference, and gives our self wholeheartedly to the process. Thank you. Thank you for giving your money to this effort. Thank you for giving your lives, your talent, your time to make this kind of impact in the world. Amen.